What happened inside that private chamber was never meant to be known. A sealed message, a trembling voice, and then silence. When the Archbishop stepped forward with news that could alter the course of the monarchy forever, King Charles didn't react as a sovereign. He reacted as a man cornered by fate. Witnesses say the room shifted in that moment. Something broke, and the crown would never feel the same again. The meeting had not appeared on any public schedule. No announcement, no press note, no ceremonial preface. Just a quiet directive delivered through trusted channels. The Archbishop would see the king immediately. It was only days before a ceremonial milestone that had been years in preparation, a moment designed to seal legacy and project continuity. Instead, it became the setting for something far more volatile. Those present described the Archbishop's demeanor as unusually restrained, solemn to the point of severity. He did not waste time on pleasantries. He came bearing a message that was not political maneuvering or public relations trouble. It was something deeper, something older. The words he spoke struck at the spiritual architecture of the coronation itself. This was not about seating arrangements or protocol disputes. It was about legitimacy, about symbolism, about the sacred thread that binds crown to altar and monarch to oath. As the Archbishop laid out the implications, the room reportedly tightened with tension. King Charles listened in rigid stillness at first, his posture unyielding, his expression fixed. But disbelief flickered across his face. Then resistance. And finally, a visible fracture. For a man who had waited a lifetime to wear the crown, this revelation was more than inconvenient, it was destabilizing. He questioned details. He challenged interpretations. He asked whether there had been a mistake. The Archbishop did not waver. The issue, he explained, could not simply be reframed. It demanded acknowledgement. It demanded a response. And with each measured sentence, the weight of it pressed harder against the king's composure. At some point, staff were dismissed. Doors were sealed. The conversation narrowed to its core. Containment mode activated almost instinctively, as if centuries of royal survival had taught the institution how to react to crisis before panic could spread. Yet whispers began anyway. Those who glimpsed the king afterward noticed the shift, an uncharacteristic strain behind his words, a tightness that had not been there before. This was not merely political turbulence. It was spiritual, constitutional, deeply personal. It touched the very ritual that would define his reign. And if the sacred foundation of that ritual trembled, what did that mean for everything built upon it? For the lineage, for the legacy, for the future. Because this revelation did not end with one man's distress. It carried implications that extended beyond Charles himself, beyond a single ceremony, reaching toward the entire royal line and the fragile covenant between tradition and authority. And as that realization settled in, the true magnitude of the moment began to unfold. But to understand why those words hit him so hard, we must first revisit the fragile foundation upon which this coronation was built. Long before the Archbishop entered that chamber, cracks were already forming beneath the gold and velvet of the monarchy. Public scrutiny, internal divisions, silent rivalries. The coronation was supposed to be a moment of unity, but behind palace walls, unease had been brewing. And as pressure mounted from every direction, King Charles found himself carrying a weight heavier than any crown in history. For decades, his path to the throne had unfolded under relentless observation. Every decision dissected, every relationship scrutinized. The coronation was meant to be redemption, a symbolic resetting of the national mood, a carefully orchestrated declaration that stability had returned, that the monarchy had weathered storms and emerged unbroken. But redemption only works when doubt has been buried. In this case, doubt lingered like a quiet echo no one could silence. Inside the royal household, tensions simmered beneath polite exchanges. Differences over vision were no longer theoretical. Some urged modernization, streamline the institution, soften the rigid edges of tradition, adapt to a restless public. Others warned that dilution meant decay, that centuries of ritual were not decorative but foundational. These disagreements were rarely shouted. They were whispered in private meetings, embedded in subtle policy shifts, hidden inside carefully worded statements. Yet the friction was real. And Charles stood at the center of it, expected to reconcile past and future with a single ceremony. The Archbishop's role in all of this was not ceremonial window dressing. His authority was constitutional and spiritual, binding crown to covenant. Without his sanction, the coronation would lose its sacred legitimacy. It was not enough for Charles to be proclaimed king by law, he had to be anointed in the language of faith and tradition. That blessing was the bridge between monarchy and meaning. And bridges, as history has shown, can collapse under pressure. Privately, Charles wrestled with an uneasy question. Was he inheriting a throne or inheriting unresolved tension? His mother's reign had been defined by endurance and quiet strength. The comparison was inevitable, even if rarely spoken aloud in his presence. He understood that expectation. He also understood how fragile public confidence had become in an age of skepticism. Advisors warned him bluntly one misstep, one perceived miscalculation, could fracture trust in ways that would not easily mend. Meanwhile, subtle signs suggested that even within the church, unity was not absolute. There were murmurs about interpretation, about relevance, about whether ancient rites carried the same resonance in a modern world. Nothing overt, nothing explosive, but enough to suggest that beneath the surface, debate was alive. All of this created a coronation already heavy with implication. It was not merely a celebration. It was a test, a referendum on continuity, a declaration that the sacred bond between throne and altar still held firm. And that is why the private meeting mattered so much, because when the Archbishop finally delivered his devastating message, it did not fall on stable ground. It struck a foundation already trembling. And then came the revelation, one that did not question ceremony alone, but the very divine foundation of the crown. The Archbishop's words were measured, precise, almost surgical, but their impact was catastrophic. What he disclosed that day wasn't a scheduling conflict or a symbolic adjustment, it was something far more destabilizing. Something that struck at centuries-old ritual. For the first time, the legitimacy of the sacred rite itself seemed uncertain. And in that uncertainty, King Charles saw not just doubt, but danger. The complication was not technical. It was not a matter of logistics that could be rearranged with a signature. It was embedded in the very wording of the oath, in the sacred choreography that binds monarch to divine covenant. The Archbishop explained that a theological conflict long dormant but newly scrutinized had resurfaced. Certain elements of the coronation rite, he warned, could be interpreted in ways that challenged their spiritual validity under evolving doctrine. The sanctity of the anointing itself risked becoming contested. That single implication detonated decades of quiet preparation. For Charles, this ceremony was not pageantry, it was destiny fulfilled after a lifetime of waiting. To hear that its spiritual foundation might be questioned felt like having the ground shift beneath him. His first reaction was firm disbelief. He pressed for clarity, asked whether precedent existed, whether the matter had been overstated. But the Archbishop did not retreat. He spoke not as a courtier, but as a guardian of faith. The concern, he insisted, was real. Those present later whispered about a moment of silence so heavy it felt physical. The king's voice, normally steady and composed, reportedly cracked when he asked the question no one else dared to voice. If the rite itself is compromised, should the ceremony proceed at all? It was a sentence that revealed something rarely glimpsed a monarch stripped of certainty. In that instant, he was not defending optics. He was confronting meaning. The implications were staggering. If doubts about the sanctity of the coronation entered public discourse, centuries of continuity could appear fragile. Tradition survives on belief. And belief, once shaken, does not easily return. Palace officials, alerted discreetly, moved quickly to contain the situation. Meetings were rearranged. Communications tightened. The circle of knowledge narrowed to a handful of senior figures sworn to silence. Yet inside that small circle, unity fractured. Some advisors argued for transparency, insisting that controlled acknowledgement would prevent speculation from spiraling. Others demanded absolute secrecy, warning that even a hint of theological controversy could ignite public debate at the worst possible moment. The divide was sharp, and it mirrored the broader tension already simmering within the institution. Charles stood at the center of it, forced to weigh not only political risk but spiritual consequence. His entire reign would be symbolically anchored to this ceremony. If the anchor was unstable, everything that followed might carry the stain of uncertainty. And in quiet reflection, he began to grasp the true magnitude of the Archbishop's warning. This was not merely about one day. It was about how history would interpret the beginning of his kingship. What made the moment even more volatile was the creeping realization that secrets rarely remain contained. Rumors travel faster than proclamations, and if this revelation leaked beyond those sealed doors, the narrative could escape control entirely. Yet the public saw none of this, only the calm exterior of a king preparing for glory. Cameras flashed, crowds cheered, the monarch waved, but behind the carefully measured smile was a man unraveling. Observers noticed subtle changes: fatigue in his eyes, hesitation in his speech. While the world celebrated pageantry, King Charles was battling a storm no one could see. The weight of divine doubt is heavier than political criticism, and it was crushing him. In public, he performed his role with disciplined precision. His gestures were steady. His tone remained composed. He spoke of unity, of continuity, of service. The language was polished, the symbolism reassuring. To the outside world, everything appeared aligned, tradition intact, authority unquestioned. But composure can be an act, and acts demand energy. Those closest to him began to sense the strain behind the performance. Insiders described subtle but unmistakable shifts. He paused longer before answering questions. He asked for clarifications on details he once would have brushed aside. Meetings that were once brisk and decisive stretched into tense exchanges. The certainty that had defined his public persona seemed edged with hesitation. It was not dramatic. It was not theatrical. It was quiet. And that quietness unsettled those who knew him best. Nights grew longer within palace walls. Strategy sessions unfolded behind sealed doors. The same circle of advisors debating how to navigate a crisis that officially did not exist. Legal implications were examined. Theological interpretations were revisited. Every potential scenario was mapped out, from silent adjustment to public acknowledgement. Yet the more they analyzed, the clearer it became that no option was without consequence. The king listened, absorbing every perspective, but the weight of the final decision remained his alone. Emotional strain began to blur into judgment. A speech draft was rewritten multiple times. A ceremonial detail once approved was suddenly questioned. Advisors exchanged concerned glances, careful not to show alarm. They had witnessed Charles endure criticism before. They had seen him stand firm through decades of scrutiny. But this was different. This was not an external challenge. It was internal, existential. The tension between appearing strong and feeling uncertain became a daily battle. To admit doubt, even privately, risked eroding authority. Yet to suppress it entirely risked fracture. He was expected to embody stability while wrestling with instability at the core of his reign. And then came the rumor, quiet at first, but persistent, that the Archbishop had requested a second meeting. That request carried its own ominous undertone. Why revisit the matter unless something remained unresolved? The mere possibility deepened Charles's isolation. Conversations grew shorter. Trust narrowed further. Even within his own residence, he felt the distance widening, a monarch surrounded by people, yet increasingly alone with his thoughts. And as whispers began to slip beyond the innermost circle, the fragile balance inside the palace started to tremble. But Charles was not the only one shaken, because once word began to spread, reactions inside the royal family were immediate and explosive. When whispers reached senior royals, the response was not sympathy, it was calculation. Some saw crisis, others saw opportunity. A destabilized coronation could shift influence, reframe alliances, even redefine succession optics. In moments of royal vulnerability, loyalty is tested. And as King Charles wrestled with spiritual doubt, others began quietly assessing the balance of power. The first reactions were controlled, almost rehearsed. Concerned expressions, measured words, assurances of unity. But beneath the surface, the atmosphere shifted. The coronation was not merely a ceremony, it was a consolidation of authority. If its spiritual foundation wavered, so too could the perception of strength at the very top. And perception in royal circles is currency. Some senior figures closed ranks immediately, presenting themselves as pillars of support. Their loyalty was vocal, visible, almost theatrical. Yet others retreated into private conversations, analyzing what this instability might mean in the long term. If the coronation were delayed, reshaped, or publicly questioned, it could alter the rhythm of succession optics. It could subtly reposition influence within the family. Even silence in such a moment carried weight. Advisors attached to different royal households began moving carefully, aligning themselves with potential outcomes. It was not open rebellion. It was subtler than that. Invitations shifted. Briefings were requested. Information became a commodity. In corridors once defined by routine, strategy replaced familiarity. The monarchy prides itself on unity, but unity under pressure reveals its fractures. The Queen Consort's reaction was perhaps the most complex. Publicly unwavering, privately alert. She understood that her position, too, was tethered to the stability of the coronation. If doubts grew about the sacred rite, they could ripple outward, touching every symbolic gesture attached to it, including her own role. She reportedly urged calm, insisting that strength lay in composure. Yet behind that composure was strategy. Protect the king. Protect the ceremony. Protect the narrative. But not everyone shared the same sense of urgency. Some worried less about theology and more about headlines. If word of the Archbishop's warning escaped containment, the story would not remain nuanced. It would become sensational. The public might not parse doctrinal complexities. They would see uncertainty at the heart of power. And uncertainty breeds speculation. Speculation breeds division. There was also a deeper anxiety one few voiced openly. If the Church's stance could challenge elements of the coronation now, what precedent would that set for the future? Would every monarch face similar scrutiny? Would sacred tradition become negotiable? The idea unsettled even the most steadfast traditionalists. What had once felt immovable now appeared vulnerable to interpretation. As discussions intensified around him, Charles felt the distance widening. Conversations grew more guarded when he entered the room. Advice came layered with caution. Even support felt strategic. The emotional isolation he had begun to experience deepened, not because he lacked allies, but because he could sense the calculations unfolding around him. In crisis, every gesture carries motive, and while the royal household maneuvered quietly, the institution at the center of the storm, the Church itself, was grappling with consequences far beyond palace politics. Meanwhile, beyond palace walls, the Church itself faced a reckoning. The Archbishop was not merely a messenger, he was a guardian of centuries-old doctrine. And his warning placed the Church in an impossible position. Protect tradition and risk division, or adapt and risk legitimacy. The coronation was no longer just a royal affair, it had become a theological crossroads. And the world's oldest monarchy now stood at its most spiritual fault line. Behind cathedral doors and within private councils, debate intensified. Senior clerics examined texts that had guided monarchs for generations. Some insisted that the rite must remain untouched, that altering even a syllable would fracture sacred continuity. Others argued that doctrine evolves, that the Church must respond to modern scrutiny or risk irrelevance. It was not a simple disagreement. It was a clash between preservation and progression, and both sides claimed moral authority. Historical parallels resurfaced in whispered conversations, moments when coronations were shadowed by controversy, when faith and power collided in ways that reshaped public trust. The Archbishop knew those precedents well. He understood that his position would be judged not only in the present, but in the context of centuries. If he remained silent and concerns later surfaced, he could be accused of negligence. If he pressed too hard, he risked destabilizing a ceremony that symbolized unity. The burden was personal. He was not just advising a king, he was guarding a covenant. Within the Church, fear grew about backlash from every direction. Traditionalists would condemn any deviation as betrayal. Reformists would question why adjustments had not come sooner. Public opinion, unpredictable and amplified by modern media, threatened to transform nuanced theological debate into polarizing headlines. The Archbishop felt the strain of standing between altar and crown, aware that whatever decision emerged would reverberate beyond the ceremony itself. Meanwhile, King Charles waited for reassurance that could not fully arrive. He needed the Church's confidence to steady his own. He needed clarity where ambiguity now lingered. But the more the debate deepened, the clearer it became that certainty was elusive. The coronation, once a symbol of inevitability, now felt contingent on interpretation. There was also the shadow of constitutional consequence. The monarch's role is intertwined with the Church not merely symbolically but structurally. If the spiritual framework shifted, even subtly, what would that imply for the monarchy's authority? Could questioning the right open the door to questioning the institution? These were not theoretical musings. They were strategic anxieties quietly acknowledged behind closed doors. The Archbishop understood that delay could amplify speculation. Swift action could provoke resistance. Every path forward narrowed toward a choice that would define both Church and Crown. And as consultations continued, it became clear that compromise might not satisfy anyone fully. What remained was a decision final, irreversible, and heavy with consequence. And as the weight of that impending choice settled over palace and cathedral alike, the strain on the monarch who stood at the center of it all grew almost unbearable. As tension mounted, King Charles reached a breaking point. It happened without cameras, without ceremony. In a private study lined with portraits of monarchs past, King Charles reportedly broke down, not as a sovereign but as a son, a father, a man facing the erosion of destiny. The crown had defined his life. And now, for the first time, it felt uncertain. Those who witnessed it say they had never seen him so shaken. For decades, he had mastered restraint. Public criticism, private turmoil, long years of waiting, he endured it all with measured patience. Emotion was something he rationed carefully, never allowing it to overshadow duty. But this was different. This was not scandal or politics. This was doubt at the very heart of the sacred ritual that would seal his reign. And doubt, when it touches faith and legacy at once, cuts deeper than opposition ever could. The pressure of history pressed in on him. He had studied past coronations, memorized their symbolism, respected their continuity. He understood how fragile public trust could be when ceremony faltered. The memory of past controversies lingered in his mind, moments when royal missteps echoed for generations. He feared not merely embarrassment but fracture. A coronation clouded by uncertainty would not just affect him. It would shape how history judged the monarchy's resilience. And then there was the unspoken comparison. Queen Elizabeth II had embodied steadiness in an era of change. Her coronation had symbolized renewal after turmoil. Charles had hoped for something similar, a reaffirmation of faith in the institution. Instead, he found himself confronting spiritual ambiguity. The contrast weighed heavily. He did not want his reign to begin under a shadow. Yet shadows were gathering despite every effort to contain them. Those closest to him described exhaustion creeping into his voice. Advisors urged composure, reminding him that strength in crisis defines leadership. They emphasized continuity, insisted that tradition could withstand scrutiny. But Charles, in rare candor, reportedly expressed how deeply the situation had unsettled him. He spoke of destiny feeling unstable, of waiting a lifetime only to face uncertainty at the threshold. The psychological toll became impossible to ignore. Spiritual doubt is not easily compartmentalized. It seeps into thought, into confidence, into resolve. Every briefing felt heavier. Every conversation circled back to the same looming question: proceed unchanged, adapt, or pause? Each option carried consequence. Each risked rewriting the narrative of his reign before it had truly begun. Meanwhile, the palace maintained disciplined silence. No statements. No clarifications. The absence of information fueled quiet speculation beyond its walls. In modern times, silence rarely calms, it invites imagination. And imagination can be ruthless. As the hours passed, it became clear that emotional collapse was not weakness, it was culmination. Years of expectation converged with immediate crisis. The king stood at a crossroads where legacy and faith intersected, knowing that whatever choice he made would echo far beyond the present moment. Because breakdowns often precede decisions, and this one would change everything. In the end, the question was simple, yet terrifying. Proceed, delay, or redefine? Every option carried consequence. Every path risked backlash. The king's next move would either solidify his reign or mark it with controversy from the very beginning. And as advisors gathered once more, the monarchy stood at the edge of transformation. The discussions were no longer theoretical. They were surgical. Proceed unchanged, and risk quiet theological dissent erupting into public controversy later. Delay, and invite speculation that the crown itself was uncertain. Redefine elements of the right, and face accusations of tampering with sacred continuity. None of the options felt safe. All of them carried weight. Charles listened as legal experts outlined constitutional implications. Senior courtiers measured public sentiment. Clerical advisors dissected doctrine word by word. Yet beneath the layers of analysis was something far more human: a monarch deciding how his reign would begin. He had spent a lifetime preparing for inevitability. Now he was confronting unpredictability. A strategic recalibration slowly began to take shape. Not abandonment. Not surrender. Adjustment. Subtle refinements to language. Clarifications of meaning. A careful reframing designed to preserve the spiritual core while acknowledging evolving interpretation. It would not be publicly described as compromise. It would be presented as continuity strengthened by reflection. The narrative had to be controlled before it controlled them. Behind the scenes, Charles sought one more private audience with the Archbishop, not as adversaries, not even as negotiators, but as two men bound by responsibility to institutions larger than themselves. The conversation was candid, direct. There was no pretense left. The king spoke of legacy, of duty, of the fragility of public trust. The Archbishop spoke of conscience, of doctrine, of the cost of silence. Somewhere between those positions, common ground was found: not perfect agreement, but shared resolve. Where despair had recently lingered, determination began to take its place. Charles understood now that leadership is not the absence of crisis, but the management of it. He could not erase the warning he had received, but he could choose how to respond. And in that choice, he reclaimed a measure of authority that doubt had momentarily shaken. Risk assessments continued. What if word leaked? What if insiders disagreed? What if adjustments were misinterpreted? The palace prepared contingency plans for every scenario. Statements were drafted, but left unsigned. Communication lines were tightened. Every detail was weighed against the singular objective: protect the institution. Privately, Charles made a vow one few would ever hear. The monarchy would endure this moment not through stubbornness, but through strength tempered with wisdom. The crown had survived wars, abdications, scandals. It would survive this too. By the end of that final meeting, a confidential understanding had been reached. The coronation would proceed, refined but intact. The church would stand beside the crown. Unity, carefully constructed, would be presented to the world. Yet even after the decision was made, one haunting question remained. The coronation would proceed, but it would never feel the same. Beneath the gold, beneath the ritual, beneath the ancient hymns, there would always be that moment in the chamber when certainty cracked. King Charles may wear the crown, but now he understands its fragility in ways no monarch before him publicly has. And that realization may define his reign more than any ceremony ever could. When the day arrived, the world saw continuity. They saw tradition carried forward with disciplined grace. They saw a monarch steady beneath the weight of history. What they did not see was the emotional aftermath that lingered beneath the surface. The Archbishop's warning did not disappear simply because agreement had been reached. It remained an invisible imprint on the ceremony itself. There were subtle shifts, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. A refinement of language. A carefully considered emphasis. Symbolism adjusted just enough to reinforce unity without exposing the debate that had preceded it. To the public, it felt seamless. To those who knew the truth, it felt earned, hard-won through tension, doubt, and resolve. Charles emerged from the crisis changed. Not diminished, but tempered. There was a new caution in his deliberation, a sharper awareness of how quickly sacred certainty can be challenged. He had confronted the possibility that the very ritual defining his reign might falter. That experience does not leave a leader untouched. It deepens him. It hardens him. It also humbles him. The monarchy itself entered a quieter, more reflective phase. The illusion of invulnerability had been pierced. Institutions built on centuries of endurance can still feel pressure from shifting interpretation. That truth, once theoretical, had become personal. And while the public celebrated spectacle, the inner circle carried the memory of how close the institution had come to spiritual fracture. Yet strength is not proven by the absence of crisis. It is revealed in response. Charles did not retreat from the moment. He did not allow despair to dictate action. Instead, he absorbed the shock and recalibrated. The coronation became not merely a display of heritage, but a testament to adaptation under pressure. A symbol not only of continuity but of resilience. Still, beneath ceremonial confidence, a quieter awareness remains. Spiritual doubt, once introduced, never fully vanishes. It becomes a companion, an internal reminder that authority is not self-sustaining. It requires vigilance. It requires reflection. And sometimes, it requires confrontation with uncomfortable truths. The greatest contrast of this chapter lies in its paradox. Outwardly, it was a triumph, ancient ritual preserved, monarchy affirmed. Inwardly, it was a reckoning, faith tested, destiny questioned, certainty shaken. That tension may shape how Charles governs from this point forward. More measured, more introspective, perhaps even more determined to protect the delicate bond between crown and conviction. History may remember the coronation as a celebration, but those who understand what unfolded behind closed doors will see something else, a turning point where fragility met fortitude. Because in the end, the greatest battles of a monarchy are not fought in public, but in the quiet moments, when faith itself begins to tremble.